Thank you very much, Sunita. And that was a really good uh, presentation. And I'm just going to build on this presentation, but we'll speak slightly about a different part of the world facing similar issues. So for the past few years, I've been researching on extreme weather events. So I'm a climate scientist looking on extreme weather events, but mainly my focus has been understanding how climate change is actually modifying the frequencies and the intensities of extreme events across the world. And so as we speak about flooding, this is just the picture of the world these few months, these first 3 months of this year, where we're seeing flooding almost everywhere. It's Dubai, we're seeing it in East Africa, we're seeing it in Brazil, Afghanistan. And this kind of flooding is unprecedented. It's really in the intensities and frequencies that we've never seen before. And for East Africa, for example, what is really the issue is that they've been prolonged drought, that they're very recurrent, but then within those droughts, there's extreme rainfall events happening. And so it means that before the system recovers from a prolonged drought, this very intense rainfall really hit the system again. So the human systems, the natural systems, don't really get the opportunity to recover for it to be able to be resilient to these shocks of climate. So what happens in that case is that the systems have become really vulnerable to the extreme weather. And that of course, that vulnerability is multidimensional as well. I mean, it intersects with other issues of socioeconomic, political, environmental, in a way that it sort of really dampens the adaptive capacity of the system. And so I just wanted to show two case studies, and one of them is a case of rising water levels in Kenya, Rift Valley Lake. And from a study that I published recently is that I was looking at sort of intensification of rainfall that has really happened over the last 15 years. And you're seeing periods of drought and then extreme rainfall, very short, intense rainfall happening. And what happens is that there's a phenomenon that is happening on the Rift Valley region. The Rift Valley region of Kenya is, of East Africa, is that region over there. So it's really a valley that cuts across from Ethiopia, Somalia, all the way to Tanzania. And what we are seeing now is that the levels of these lakes have been rising. And it's rising in a way that it's really displacing a lot of people. It's causing a lot of impacts to the surrounding communities. And you find that now there's a lot of losses in terms of millions of revenues from tourism, because this is really a place where there's, it's a hub of tourism. I mean, there was a lot that this region could offer in terms of the biodiversity, the ecosystem, and it was really supporting the communities there. But what you see now is post-migration, people losing their culture, their sense of place, their heritage, and it's really with nearly close to 300 square kilometers of land around these lakes that have been submerged. And what happens is that these communities can't farm anymore, right? They can't enjoy their place of living, and they have been forced to move. And it's really a problem. And this second picture there, what you can see there is that there was a bridge connecting two islands in one of the lakes there, and you see that is completely submerged. And the other one on the left is that was a place where there were tourists, there were shops. I mean, tourist shops. There were centers, recreational centers, that the community could use, but you can see completely from, you can see from that figure that this is completely submerged. And the other thing that I thought would be a good case as well is on the rate of urbanization that we're seeing in the global south at the moment, and Africa is not an exception. And it's really on the informality. And we could see very clearly from the flooding that happened in Kenya this past month that our infrastructure is getting quite stretched, especially in the informal sectors where like the planning is not as adequate. And I think one thing for sure that is key now is really to transform the urban structures and the governance in the urban cities so that it can really accommodate this sort of rapid urbanization and also the changes in the dynamics around like cities and all that. And, but I think what is really important, what I thought is important for me to point out as well in my presentation today is the fact that the level of adaptation finance that is available for vulnerable communities or even for governments to spend is really quite low. And this report, adaptation gap report, showed very clearly that adaptation is very underfinanced at the moment, and it's really lacking in all areas. So it's on planning, and it's on investment, and on finance itself. And what this means, what's the consequence of this is that we will see these extreme events continuing to impact vulnerable communities, impact escalating, and going to really increase the vulnerability and dampen that adaptive capacity of these communities. And one thing as well, I mean, it's one thing to say that, I mean, even as the governor for Nairobi, for Vika today explained, is that there's a lot of strategies and interventions, both at the national and the local level, that the Kenyan government is putting. But the thing with that is that if the financial flows are not adequate, it means that there will be a growing debt distress because national governments have to dig into their pockets to spend their national budgets to respond to this confluence of crises or disasters. And especially for East Africa now, where we see from one extreme drought going to one extreme rainfall event, causing massive flooding, it means that the government is really spending a lot of money responding to these disasters, trying to see how communities can build their resilience, anticipate better for these disasters. And so then, what is really urgent is the fact that we need transformational investments in developing countries. And I think very importantly in that case as well is to talk about concessional finance, right? So that really these governments or developing country governments can be able to service this debt. Because you can see very clearly from this slide that these net finance flows to developing countries turned negative in 2023. And this has been a trend. And then so it means really for these countries, it's a very difficult time for them, where they are having to respond to these increasing disasters, escalating impacts, and then at the same time, they need to provide, or they need to allocate money for priority areas like health, education, social protection, and other very crucial priorities for their countries. And so then, why does this matter? I think it matters because I just said that really if the developing countries are left to respond to these alone, it means then there will be low spending on health, education, and other social, and maybe social spend and social protection, for example. And then there'll be increased cost on capital and even low investment. And what that means is that there'll be really so slow urgency in like transition, energy transition, and even investing in resilient infrastructure that can make these countries more resilient. So that means these countries are going to continue experiencing these escalating impacts in ways that can really be difficult for them to cope. But But I think something very crucial as well to say is that there will be missed opportunity in the case that we know Africa, for example, now is really critical for energy transition, right? I mean, we have the critical minerals and the carbon sinks. And of course, I'm not saying that we should shift the decarbonization burden to the global south, but I'm saying that I think Africa or all critical resource that can help us transition globally. Thank you.